Christmas dinner. My sister opened the door and said, "We don't want you here." 5 minutes later, my dad came running after me, and what happened next shattered our family forever. I'm 31, and for most of my life, I truly believed that no matter what happened, family would always be a safe place to fall back on. I grew up thinking that holidays, especially Christmas, were about love, warmth, and belonging. But last year on Christmas Eve, I found out just how wrong I was, and the truth cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. I pulled into my sister's driveway exactly at 6 o'clock, the time she and I had agreed on weeks earlier. The house was glowing like something out of a holiday catalog, with strings of warm yellow lights draped around the porch and frost on the windows catching the light just right. As I walked up the steps balancing a bottle of wine in one hand and neatly wrapped gifts in the other, I could hear laughter and music floating from inside. For a moment, my heart lifted. This was what Christmas was supposed to feel like. But before I could knock, the front door swung open. My sister stood there, arms crossed, her expression sharp in a way I'd never seen before. She looked me up and down, rolled her eyes dramatically, and said the words that would stay burned into my memory forever. "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." For a split second, I couldn't even process what she had said. Behind her, I saw the entire family gathered around the table. My mom laughing with a cousin, my brother passing plates to his kids, even my dad carving into a golden turkey. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. And that's when it hit me like ice water. This wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't a mistake. This was planned. I stood frozen, the wine bottle growing heavy in my hand, the gifts suddenly feeling pointless. My sister's face didn't soften. She just kept that cold, dismissive look, like I was a stranger interrupting their perfect evening. Finally, I nodded slowly, forced a small smile, and said quietly, "Got it." I turned away from the warm light of the house, walked back to my car, and placed the gifts and wine gently in the back seat. My hands shook so hard on the steering wheel that I could barely drive. As I pulled away from the house, my chest felt hollow, like I had just been erased from my own family. 5 minutes later, I was sitting at a red light just 2 blocks away from my sister's house, staring blankly at the traffic signal as my phone buzzed repeatedly. My hands were still trembling on the steering wheel, and my stomach felt like it had been dropped from a great height. Then I heard something that made me jerk my head up, a familiar voice, yelling my name over the sound of an engine. I looked into the rearview mirror and saw my dad's truck barreling toward me, hazard lights flashing like some kind of emergency. He pulled up alongside my car, rolled down his window, and shouted for me to pull over. The sheer desperation in his voice shook me. This wasn't a casual request. Something in him needed me to stop. Against my better judgment, I nodded and followed him into the parking lot of a closed gas station. We sat there with our engines running, windows down, steam rising from the exhaust into the cold night air. My dad looked at me like a man on the brink, his face flushed, his breathing shallow. He demanded to know what had just happened at the door, and so I told him, word for word, what his daughter had said to me. "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." The color drained from his face instantly. First white, then red, then something darker, almost purple with rage. He shook his head violently, slamming his fist against the steering wheel. "That's not true," he said. "You were supposed to be there. I told her to make sure you knew. I asked her myself weeks ago." That's when the puzzle pieces started sliding into place. 3 weeks earlier, Dad had asked my sister to handle all the Christmas coordination. She was supposed to confirm the time with me, ask what I wanted to bring, make sure I was included. But she'd lied. She'd never called. The only reason I even knew dinner was at 6 was because I ran into our cousin at the grocery store, and she casually mentioned it. I'd assumed I'd missed the official invite somehow. But now I understood it wasn't an oversight. It was a setup. Dad's anger grew with every word. He told me to follow him back to the house, that we were going to sort this out right now. But I shook my head. I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk back into a house where every face at that table had been lit with laughter while I was turned away at the door like an unwanted guest. I told him I appreciated him coming after me, but I was done. I wasn't going to force myself into a place where I clearly wasn't wanted. He kept arguing, saying it was a misunderstanding, but deep down he knew the truth. I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't the first time my sister had done something like this. The graduation party where she forgot to tell me the location had changed. The birthday dinner where she claimed someone else was supposed to call me. The wedding planning meetings that magically happened without me knowing. This Christmas dinner wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of years of quiet exclusion. We talked for almost an hour in that cold parking lot, my breath fogging in the air as I listened to my dad admit something he should have faced a long time ago. My sister had been building a narrative against me for years, painting me as irresponsible, unreliable, always causing drama. None of it was true, but she'd been whispering it long enough that people stopped questioning her. My dad confessed he'd chosen to keep the peace instead of confronting it. But when he saw me turn away from that door, gifts in hand, he realized keeping the peace had just cost him his son's trust. I drove home that night with my heart heavy but my mind clearer than ever. For the first time in my life, I saw my family dynamic for what it really was. I wasn't an equal member. I was an optional addition, someone they could exclude at will, then pretend it was just miscommunication. And as I sat alone in my apartment later that night, staring at the wrapped gifts that would never be opened, I made a decision that would change everything about my future. I would no longer fight for a seat at a table where I wasn't welcome. The fallout from that Christmas dinner was immediate and devastating. While I sat alone in my apartment, quietly letting the reality sink in, my dad stormed back to my sister's house and confronted everyone sitting at the table. Later that night, my brother called me, his voice tight with frustration, to tell me what had happened. According to him, it turned into one of the ugliest fights in family history. The kind of confrontation that strips away every polite layer and forces truths into the open. Dad walked straight into the dining room, his face still flushed with the anger I had seen in the parking lot. He didn't sit down, didn't even take off his jacket. He demanded to know who else had known about the plan to exclude me. His voice boomed across the table, shattering the cheerful illusion my sister had tried to create. Mom claimed she thought I'd chosen not to come. My brother insisted he'd asked my sister twice if I was attending, and she told him yes both times. My aunt, who had driven hours from out of state, said she'd even brought an extra gift for me and had been wondering where I was. Piece by piece, the truth unraveled. My sister had lied to everyone. She told Mom I might be spending Christmas with my girlfriend's family. She told our aunt I might be working. She told my brother I had confirmed but would probably be late. She built a web of half-truths, each thread designed to keep suspicion away from her while she executed her plan to push me out completely. When my dad revealed what I had told him, that she looked me dead in the eye and said, "We don't want you here," the room fell silent. Then my sister exploded. She screamed that I was always playing the victim, always turning situations into drama, always demanding to be the center of attention. She dragged up old grudges she had been hoarding for years, things I didn't even know she had been angry about. Leaving her birthday party early when I had food poisoning. Bringing a store-bought dessert to Thanksgiving instead of baking something from scratch. Not offering to help decorate for Mom's surprise party 2 years ago. Each complaint petty on its own, but stacked together like weapons she had been saving for this exact moment. The table fell apart. My aunt shook her head in disgust and left early, saying she refused to be around such negativity during the holidays. My brother, normally the family's peacekeeper, lost his temper and packed up his wife and kids, leaving without a word. My mom buried her face in her hands and cried, torn between her children but too afraid to pick a side. And my dad, for the first time in my life, drew a line. He told my sister that either she apologized to me and made things right, or she would no longer be allowed to host family gatherings. But my sister didn't apologize. She doubled down. She insisted she was protecting the family from me, that my presence was toxic, that I would always be a source of trouble. Her words were poison, And the more she spoke, the more I realized that this wasn't a temporary rift. This was years of resentment finally exploding into the open. While my family was imploding around a turkey dinner, I was at home staring at my laptop screen, researching job opportunities in other cities. For months, I had been half considering a change, but now the decision felt clear. This wasn't just about escaping the chaos. It was about choosing myself for the first time. By the time the new year rolled around, I already had interviews lined up in 3 different states. And as my dad was arguing with my sister, as my brother was slamming the front door behind him, as my mom was crying into a napkin, I was quietly closing my laptop and whispering to myself a promise I should have made years ago. I deserve better than this. By the time January was over, I had 2 solid job offers in my hands, both in cities over 1,000 miles away from the house where my sister had shut the door on me. I accepted the one that took me farthest, not out of spite, but out of a desire to build a life where my presence was never conditional. For once, I wanted to be somewhere I was genuinely wanted, not just tolerated. I told my dad first. We'd started meeting for coffee after the Christmas disaster. His way of showing me that he still wanted me in his life. When I broke the news that I was leaving for good, the look on his face nearly broke me. He begged me to rethink, promising that things would be different, that he wouldn't let my sister dictate family dynamics anymore. But I told him this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. I was done fighting for space in a family that could so easily push me out. He looked heartbroken, but deep down he understood. Telling my mom was harder. She cried immediately, asking what she had done wrong and how she could fix it. I tried to explain that she hadn't done anything directly wrong, but she had also never stood up when it counted. She had chosen silence over action, and that silence had cost me more than she realized. She promised to visit me in my new city, and I nodded, though I knew our relationship would never be the same. My brother surprised me. When I told him about the move, he nodded quietly and said he understood. He told me he wished things were different, but that he respected me for choosing myself. He promised to stay in touch, and unlike all the empty promises I had heard over the years, I actually believed him. I didn't tell my sister directly. I figured she'd find out eventually, and she did. 3 days before my moving truck arrived, she showed up at my apartment. Her eyes were puffy, her face drawn, like she hadn't slept in weeks. She spilled out an apology that lasted nearly an hour, but every word felt hollow. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry it had backfired. She said things like, "I'm sorry you felt excluded," and "I'm sorry if it came across that way." Never once did she admit that she had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't wanted. I thanked her for coming, told her I forgave her for my own peace, but made it clear that forgiveness didn't mean staying. I was leaving, and nothing she could say would change that. She left angry, accusing me of being overdramatic, proving her point about me always making things about myself. And that's when I realized something. Even her apology was conditional on me doing what she wanted. Moving was the best decision I ever made. In my new city, I found a job that challenged and rewarded me, friends who valued me without condition, and a life that finally felt like mine. My dad and brother kept their promises and visited often. My mom, slowly, began to understand that keeping the peace wasn't the same as keeping a family together. As for my sister, we haven't spoken in over a year. I don't hate her, but I don't miss her either. Looking back, being turned away from that Christmas dinner was the harshest gift I ever received. But it was also the most important. It forced me to see the truth, to stop excusing the inexcusable, and to choose myself for once. Sometimes the greatest lesson life teaches you is that family isn't defined by obligation or guilt. It's defined by mutual respect, by people who show up consistently, by love that doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient. My sister thought shutting that door would be the end of my story, but in reality, it was the beginning of a better one.